Good evening, everybody. Today is Tuesday, August 30th. The time is 6 p.m. We're here for the work session of the Coppell City Council. We do have a quorum present, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. Our second item of business is citizens' appearance. We did not have anybody sign up to speak, so I'll forego the formalities there. We do have 3 items on our agenda tonight. These are all informational for the council. There is no decision or direction required tonight, so this is FYI, basically. Please feel free to ask questions, and this is just to inform us about what's going on. Item A, 3A, is Plan Development Review by Mr. Hager. Bob?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight to talk to you a little bit and give you some background on zoning issues. I think it's dead. Batteries, maybe. Bye-bye. I can speak up. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. All right. So I'm here to talk to you tonight about work session, about plan development. What I've kind of labeled this as flexible zoning. One of the things that you wanted me to talk about, I don't know if you wanted me to talk about, but somebody was plan development. And most of the zoning cases that you have presided over in the last couple of years are plan developments. And what are those, and why do we use them? Come on in.
He got scared.
And so what I want to do is kind of explain to you.
It's not working.
You got it?
The mic doesn't work.
Yeah.
The clicker?
No, the clicker works.
Oh.
It's the mic.
Oh, it doesn't amplify. We just use it for downstairs.
Oh, okay. So it doesn't amplify, so I'll speak up. So traditionally, we have used plan developments in town, and that started back when Gary Sieve was the planning director in the 1990 ordinance that we passed and provides for plan developments. And what are those? And if you've ever talked to any of your colleagues in other cities, they use plan developments, but maybe not to the extent that we do here in Coppell or have in the past. And so I wanted to talk to you about what they are and why we use them. First of all, like any zoning matter, you always start off with a comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is the guidepost for all zoning decisions. That's basically, it's required now by state law to have a comp plan. We've had one in Coppell for well over 35 years, and we use these. And the comp plan talks about land use, transportation, public facilities. There can be other plans like park plans, your water and sewer plans. All of those go to the comp plan so that we design our infrastructure to complement the uses that we have throughout the town. And so the comp plan, by its very nature, helps you determine what the zoning is. One of the notations on the comp map is that it's not zoning. So what it really does is define for you where the industrial part is, where the commercial part of the town will be, where the residential elements of the town will be, maybe where multifamily is. And then the city has to adopt a comprehensive zoning ordinance to actually put regulations for these different districts to match up with the comp plan. And all zoning has to comply with the comp plan. So once in a while you'll see a zoning ordinance that also amends not only the zoning ordinance but amends the comp plan. And that's because a particular tract of land may be in a retail area and we want to change it to a residential area, so we have to at the same time amend the comprehensive plan. And so you'll see the staff report making that recommendation to you to amend the comp plan. Notice, all that goes in the notice that we're going to amend the comprehensive plan, and we're going to amend the zoning ordinance. So a lot of times council members and cities struggle with the comp plan thinking that it's zoning when it's really not zoning. And if you look at the comp plan map, it has to have this notation. So from that, we're told under state law that we can adopt zoning regulations. And really what zoning regulations just comes out of the statute, is we can regulate the height, the number of stories, the size of buildings and structures, the percentage of the lot that's occupied, the size of the yards, the courts and open spaces, population density, location and use of buildings, other structures and land for business, industrial, residential. So it's, this guy right here is what you really do. It's about land use. And so, is it going to be residential? If it's going to be residential, it's going to be SF7, SF9, SF12, SF estates. And when we make those delineations, what we're really talking about is the size of the lots, 12,000 square foot lots, 7,000 square foot lots. And then correspondingly, many cities have minimum house sizes. We really focus on the lot size, not the house size. Some other cities struggle with minimum sizes for homes, but they're always less than really what the market demands, what the community demands, and what the price points are. So we generally don't have a problem with minimum house sizes. If you go to the colony, if you're familiar with the colony, when the colony was incorporated, they had starter homes, and they were what everyone in our business calls Fox and Jacobs homes. They were a builder back then, and they made basically 1,200 to 1,800 square foot homes, and they were very affordable price point, and other cities didn't want that, so then they started adopting these minimum house sizes along with minimum lot size. So that is what our state law authorizes. And then it has to comply with the comp plan to, and the purpose is for us to have these is to let less congestion in the streets, safety from fire panic, so we have that separation, side yard setbacks, front yard setbacks, promote general health and welfare, provide adequate light and air so that we're not all crowding over each other, prevent overcrowding the land, avoid undue concentration of population, or transportation, water, sewer, and infrastructure. So these things aren't specifically, when you read the staff report, they don't specifically talk about those 7 categories, but if, you know, the width of the street talks about transportation, but the side yard setbacks talks about concentration, lot size, lot congestion, and overcrowding, rear and front yard setbacks from our neighbors so that we have plenty of air and space so that we don't live on top of them. Also, we're provided, we do have the ability to adopt districts, okay? And we have, I went through the residential districts, but we have a LI district, we have commercial, 1 and 2s, they have retail in it, we have office, we have multifamily, we have a specialty district, an old town, historic district, and I'm not going to talk about those kind of overlays tonight, that's a different subject matter. But we have districts, so they're defined by streets generally or other landmarks. So all of our SF7, if you're in an SF7 district, 7,000 square foot lots, it's framed by various streets in town, and that's where those size lots are developed and the houses that are put on. That is traditionally what land use lawyers call it Euclidean zoning. It's not about the mathematician, it's about the village of Euclid versus Amber Realty, which is the United States Supreme Court case that authorized the use of zoning as an appropriate land use control. So that's why the city, why government gets to tell an owner of property how they can rate. It's the basis of all land use regulation. Without that case, various attempts at zoning have been struck down by state courts. But they said that was a due process, substantive due process, that is a reasonable regulation for the orderly development of land. So that's the basis for it. We have to always be reasonable, and we always have to have a justification for it in terms of those elements that are in the statute that we just went over. So that's traditional Euclidean zoning. 1921 was when that case was decided by the United States Supreme Court. It was pretty much adopted in Dallas. 1925, I think, they adopted their first zoning ordinance. So we have developed our communities in North Texas through this traditional Euclidean zoning concept. We divide the city up into sectors or sections. We define what the uses are, what the height of the buildings are, how big the lot sizes are, the streets, and the infrastructure. And again, I refer to the village of Euclid, I think it's 1926, so I guess it was 1920. Yeah, it was 25 when Dallas adopted their ordinance, and this case was actually in process and actually formally adopted. So Dallas has always had a zoning ordinance. Our other large city in Texas, Houston, didn't have a zoning ordinance until about 20 years ago. And they determined their land use by the use of deed covenants. And what they did is, so if I bought property from one of you, there was a deed covenant in there, and then the deed covenant was also, the city of Houston was what they call a beneficiary of that deed covenant and could enforce that deed covenant. And that's how, and that's why Houston looks a lot different than Dallas. If you go to that Montrose district, you'll have rice will be down there, there'll be a retail store, and then there'll be a large home. So it's just a difference in how those two communities decided that they wanted to use land use regulations. But they now have a zoning ordinance, and so see the wisdom in that. So we traditionally have residential, non-residential, multifamily, and then there's these things called special and flexible district. And what I want to talk to you tonight is flexible districts. So a flexible district is a district that allows standards to be developed that are peculiar to that development or that tract of land. So, and they have no predetermined lot sizes, they have no necessarily predetermined uses, they don't have any predetermined height. The city reasonably falls with the responsibility of setting those standards for that property to meet the needs of the landowner and to meet the needs of the community and to take into account the topography of the property and its adjacency to other land uses. It allows for multiple uses. Generally, if you have an SF7 district, it has to be residential. In the planned development, you can have a mix of uses. You can have retail, you can have housing, you can have multifamily housing, you can have offices. And it was 1968 was really the first reported case out of New York that allowed this flexible zoning. We here in Texas, in North Texas, one of my partner's father did one of the very first urban developments in the United States. And I remember in 1972, before I was a lawyer, I was in his office and I saw a model that was as long as your table in his office, and he was the attorney for the Carpenters, Southland Life Corporation. And you know that is Irving, and their ranch is Las Colinas. And what I was looking at, I had no idea at the time, was the model of Las Colinas that was in his office. Mr. Dillard, of Nichols Jackson Dillard, the elder, is the one that wrote that ordinance. And so it was one of the very first planned land use planners call these things planned unit developments, or PUDs. In Texas, we shortened it to planned developments and used that as an acronym. But what it is the very first flexible zoning, which is Las Colinas here in this area. After the building of Las Colinas, this product became very popular in all the suburb cities and in Dallas. So what is this flexible zoning? Well, what it is, it allows for a variety of uses, and we have used that to our betterment here in Coppell. There's very few neighborhoods in this city that are not in a planned development district. And why that is the council, at the time with the help of the planning department, was able to tailor all of these neighborhoods so that they would match and work together. So you and your predecessors are to be applauded for being forward-thinking enough to use this. I often kid the planning department and some of my colleagues that Coppell is Spanish for plan development. We've used these a lot. And I think anyone that ever comes here can see the benefit of doing that. It led to a lot of long meetings over the years. I can remember times when we were here at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning on zoning basis. And so this flexible allows us to have different lot sizes within the plan development. It has different zoning regulations for some lots than other lots. It allows for a mix of neighborhood in terms of house sizes and lot sizes, street sizes, parks, open space, and we can tailor all of those to the topography of our community. And although I've got some stories about, and I doubt that anyone here knows what turkey knob is, but you know, we've tried to keep some of the natural features that were here and accommodate those in terms of doing our development instead of doing what we did in Plano, and that's basically take a bulldozer and just straight up flat and build houses. So these things like plan development allows you to accommodate. We've got a number of creeks, obviously, that go through our town. And given the size of our town, we have a lot of creeks for the size of our town, frankly, and so it's helped us develop all of that property instead of in a cookie cutter fashion, in a more compatible and appropriate communities. So the whole idea of these plan development districts is intended to provide for combining the mixed uses. And when mixed uses, it doesn't necessarily have to be retail and office, or retail and industrial, or retail and housing for single-family residents, but it could be a mix of single-family residents, and that's what we have done over the years. None of the uses in a plan development are necessarily preordained, so you can write those regulations to accommodate. I'll pick on Mr. Barnell. You know, he's got kind of a unique piece of property that he has. Well, do we get rid of that and just have a commercial district, or do we try to incorporate these kind of unique, maybe historical uses that we have into something else? Well, this flexible zoning allows us to do that, to accommodate those and keep some of our, you know, we have an overlay district. I'm not going to get into that in Old Town, but, you know, you've created that whole area, that whole Baptist property, the Baptist Foundation, Carter Crowley, and when we got that, we had this huge tract of land. Well, you've used this PD to, you know, create Old Town, create townhomes and the houses that surround Old Town, keep some of the older buildings that are there, accommodate the height of those buildings. We've added some.
Do not buy solar panels if you live in one of these.
Through the PD, you've added, you know, the condos that you all authorized mixed use, live and work. In that part of town, and that's a very unique use that you may not have been able to do with just traditional zoning. Now, under our ordinance, I'll get you to our ordinance. Our ordinance incorporates this idea of flexible zoning. We have, it's in chapter 12-27 is our plan development ordinance. And it says that we have the right to do this flexible zoning, that we can use all these tools in our toolkit to develop our town in the way we have, and to mix uses and heights and building styles. And one of the things that's required of the applicant is they have to have a concept plan. They have to tell you what they intend to do with their land. And they draw that out for you so that you, as the council, can see, in order for you to do this flexible zoning,
where the buildings generally be located, where the uses will be located, where the streets are generally going to be located, lot sizes, etc. Once you do a concept plan, then there's a thing called the detailed site plan. Now I'm going to get away from this to show you the difference. In Dallas, if you get a plan development, which they have too, you come to them, not even necessarily with concept plan. You come to them and say, I want 30% residential, I want 25% retail, until you get to 100%, and they have a palette, if you will, of how that works. So if you have this, then you have to do these things. If you have that size building, you have to do these things. If you have this style of building, you have this size. If you want a streetscape, it's got to look kind of like this. If it's going to have retail, they got to have these things. And so you have to put together, along with the staff, that actual detail to their plan development. They pass their plan developments and say, okay, it's going to have, in North Lake's an example. So when we went down there for that, they'll say, you can't have any more than 10,000 family units, and you can have commercial in there, you can have retail in there, you can have multifamily in there, and how it looks, if you hit the percentages, are according to the development standards that we have for plan developments. And so you'll meet with the staff and decide what it looks like. They never see it again. That's not what the product we have here. Our product is you bring the concept plan to show us what you want to do so that we know what we're getting. So it'll have a chunk that says hotel, and there a chunk that may say office, and a chunk that says retail. We don't put percentages. You could if you wanted to, or if the staff recommended. Because a lot of times these are speculative, so they don't know who their tenants are going to be. So they want some latitude. So they generally have a concept. Okay, here's our concept. It'll have this many office buildings, maybe a hotel, maybe some multifamily, some retail. Then they're required under our ordinance to bring back a detailed site plan. So if the eastern half or the eastern quarter, that's where the hotel's going to go, and that's where the concept plan said it was going to go, now they have to bring back a detailed site plan. It has to show you what the building's going to look like, how high it's going to be, where's the parking, what the floor plan is, how does it interact with the rest, where the access is, where the fire lanes are going to be, etc. So in that detail, we have traditionally required the council to approve that detailed site plan. Some cities, they delegate that to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Some places, like Dallas, it's basically an administrative function. But in our city and many other cities of this size in the Metroplex, the council again reviews and approves that detailed site plan with all those elements in it. And you'll see in here, here's what's required by ordinance. They have to have a scaled drawing. Now, I don't mean to talk bad about some of my clients, but they don't require that. So you can imagine it looks like stuff's drawn on the back of a napkin. That doesn't cut it. It won't cut it here because it's hard to enforce. So when we wrote the ordinance, it says you have to have detailed, scaled drawings, so you know how many feet this is from that, what the height's going to be, etc. So, where are the streets? Where are the buildings going to look like? Where are the easements going to be? Where are the schools going to go? How much do we take in right-of-way to widen the street down in the future? Or is the street always going to be 24 feet, or do we need more space for future development? So all those details for that site in that plan development have to be approved by you. They have to bring us the tree survey and mitigation plan. They have to have a landscape. See, when you get that packet, it's because the ordinance requires it. You're supposed to show us what the elevations are gonna look like, so we know what we're getting. And this last one is my lawyer weasel provision. It says any other thing that basically that's reasonable and you think's important. Okay. So when we get a plan development, you're going to get these 6 plus whatever the staff, based in their professional opinion, is appropriate, development, and reasonable. And then you, as council, have on many occasions over the years asked for either a concession or an extra regulation. And I'll let you do that as long as it's reasonable. Okay? What's the purpose of it? Does it serve a purpose, or if it's just gratuitous, or does it serve some public purpose? If it serves a public purpose in the development, then it's reasonable. That's what the judge will. So you'll go through and you'll see your staff report with all these elements to it. That's why those zoning cases become so complicated. Because you've got to look at the tree survey and the landscape and the sites themselves. So, the ordinance ultimately, after we get done playing with it, but done examining this, and the other thing you need to understand that's really important, that zoning is legislation. It's like when you write any other ordinance, whether you're regulating the speed on the street, or requirements for STRs, or health code, it's legislative. So that means you have lots of discretion. And as long as it meets reasonably related to the health, safety, and welfare of the community, it's legal, which is lawyers refer to as substantive due process. Back to Amber Realty. So, you get these detailed site plans. Now, the other part of this is ordinances are not forever, and zoning ordinances sure aren't forever. So, either the owner or a tenant or someone that has that property under management may come to you and ask you to amend whatever zoning it is, whether it's Euclidean zoning or whether it's a planned development, because it is legislative in nature. So all of these are subject, once they're built, many times they're built and the economy may do something. New uses come into, one of the things we struggle with sometimes in our ordinance is 30 years old. And so uses that didn't even exist in 1990 are now popular. And so we try to use this PD to get that flexibility, but it may change how the interrelationship works between the uses, between the lots, between the height of the buildings, and so we may be asked to amend it. There's various things that cause people to have to amend their PDs, because a lot of times the developers that do build them have no idea who their tenants are going to be. They can guess. When we built hotels here in town, we would ask them who their franchisee is going to be. But you never asked them whether Dunkin' Donuts was going in or First Watch or any of those, because they didn't know. And so a lot of times the first use becomes the anchor, and then it dictates what gets built in around it. Things change over time. Businesses come, with COVID, the retail business has changed dramatically, and so less retail space is needed. So maybe they want to convert retail space into some other use. They're going to come back to this product and ask you maybe to amend the uses that are in there. They may ask you to amend how the configuration of the PD will flow from now on with the different uses. They may take out a building, they may add to a building. There may be requirements for fire and police that need to be addressed because of the uses that go in there. All those things will dictate possible amendments to the ordinance. Find a bald eagle's nest on it. So you just never know. And it is legislative in nature, and they're subject to change. I used to tell Mr. Nichols, he was the only man I knew that had zoned all of Dallas since he was the city attorney in 1935, and then come back in 1960s and rezoned it all. So, you know, and I've seen that here. I mean, I'm unfortunately, or fortunately for me, I guess, have been around long enough to see things that have been zoned and now they're rezoned. I'm going through that a lot with my client in Duncanville. That community's changed dramatically. It was maybe hard to believe, but in the 1970s, Duncanville was Coppell. And now it's not. And some of it is, well, I won't go into that. Some people have more vision than other people, put it that way. But we're struggling with rezoning that community. And so one of the things we did when they adopted their new zoning ordinance, they got a heavy dose of PDs and special uses and special use permits. So once the district's approved in accordance with the provisions of the ordinance, is it as if we had originally zoned it that way, so you have the same protections and responsibilities to enforce the zoning ordinance as you would any other district in town. And I'm done, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. And I hit my mark, Mayor, 30 minutes.
Questions, anybody? I've got one. I never really thought of it this way. I appreciate the presentation tonight. So years ago, we collectively came up with a comprehensive land use plan. We came up with divisions for that, with land uses for those. And we have our zoning ordinances for inside those. So you can come in with a planned development in any one of those areas for a very specific purpose that doesn't meet the original land use.
Yes.
And the reason that we can do that is because then it comes to this council for approval, because we're the ones that set the original rule. Is that right?
Yes. But it always has to do this. It always has to match the comp plan. But the comp plan, when you get the presentation from the consultants that bring you the comp plan and work with you and Planning and Zoning Commission and that comp plan, one of the things they tell you, it's organic, it changes over time, and you're required to review it because we're going to have less change. So when Coppell was beginning to grow, no one ever envisioned all of the infrastructure that was around, like 121 being what it is now, and 635 was in its infancy, and the airport was coming online, how that would impact our community. And so, you know, we had the west side of town, which, to their benefit, they identified as, benefiting from the airport, and that's where the industrial part of town would be, and we're going to keep this core on the east side for residential.
Bob, remember West Haven? The comprehensive land use plan had that as commercial, industrial, warehouse, land use designation. They came through the process with the council, so at the same time they were amending the comprehensive plan and changing the zoning with the PD. So that's the legislative part. They go hand in hand. If you didn't approve the comprehensive plan change, you can't approve because it's not consistent.
Yeah, and we try to bring them together. At one time when we were growing so fast, we couldn't get the comp plan changed fast enough, and so like every 6 months we had to bring a comp amendment separate from the zoning ordinance because we couldn't keep up. One, Gary didn't have staff, and we were growing so fast. I mean, one of the things that is nice to come to your council meeting, maybe you have 1 or 2 zoning cases. I remember nights when we had 5 or 6. And it was terrifying. It was long and tedious, and but that's why your community looks so nice. So,
Thank you. Bijou.
Bob, you mentioned that creating a district within the planned use,
yes.
and I know we had to create a water district at the Cypress Water before we sold. Is that included in that?
No, when I'm talking about districts, I'm talking about a category of land use districts. Those are special districts
Okay.
that are authorized by state law, and they provide infrastructure, usually water, sewer, irrigation, drainage are the common ones. We have one in town. North Lake is part of that Dallas Flood Control District #1 that runs the, over in Mark's neighborhood, runs the canal system and the drainage. They went bankrupt, which is a whole nother story. But that's a special, and then we had a municipal utility district at one time that we absorbed in the late 60s. It was over near where, off Sandy Lake. Where that new lift station is going in, that was part of that MUD, as they call municipal utility district. And so we absorbed that and took over that function and their debt. I only got that paid off. Any other questions? Thank you.
See none. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob.
The Gary Seaves name was in my head a lot during the presentation.
Yeah. Well, and you know, Gary came out of Dallas.
Yep.
Because I remember going to a
He
zoning
did
piece
great
with
things.
Mr. Nichols, and Gary was the presenter, so I was real young then too. Doogie Howser.
All right, item B is our Art Center operations update with Miss Jeanine presenting.
Hello, thank you for having me tonight. As you all know, I am the manager over at the Art Center, and I would like to present to you kind of a recap of our very first season at the Art Center that will be completed at the end of September, and also an operational update for the center in general. If you're not aware, the center has 3 tiers how we perform our events. And the first tier is our presented events. So I'm going to start with our presented events. This year, for the 21-22 season, we presented 19 individual titles, which came to a total of 31 individual performances. What you see here, 8,526 tickets sold. That is as of the end of July performances, so that does not include Rob Lake that happened this Sunday, or the DSO, or the Damn Tall Buildings in September. But they are included in the 31 total shows. So we had 8 touring shows. Examples of those shows is Buddy Holly and Simon and Garfunkel. 8 concerts, like C-Notes we had over the summer. And we had a speaker series that also had grant funding from our foundation board, which included Carla Hall and Solomon Thomas. And then we had our illusionist, Rob Lake. He was our magician for this season. He was just this past Sunday. So in total, those 31 performances, well, actually it's 27, made up those 8,526 tickets, because I don't want to forecast the other shows. How does that break down? The revenue from presented shows break down in ticket sales, and the ticket sales come in the face value of the ticket, and then we have the facility fees. That is $1 for every ticket purchased goes into a separate account that we hold on to maintain the interior structures of the performance halls. That's that $1 fee on top of the face value of the ticket. We also receive concession profits. So once we exceed our operational costs from our exclusive caterer, Macklin's, we receive a profit. And then we also receive foundation grant money from the Coppell Arts Center Foundation. Greg Goyne did that presentation at the last meeting. So that is all of the ways that we receive revenue from our presented season. So what are our expenses for our presented season? The first one right off the bat are artist fees. So that is when we bring in a show, I have to work with a booking agent, and then I have to work with touring agents, and we negotiate artist fees for how many shows they're going to do. And then we also have to negotiate how much we're going to spend on our marketing for that event. Also, there are contract fees that go with every single show we bring in. Some of those contracted fees are, we pay for the performer's travel. We pay for the performer's lodging while they're in town. We have to supply catering for them while they are on site. Sometimes we have to supply ground transportation to and from the airport, to and from the hotel. We have to have a runner on site to get them things while they're here. And then backline. If you're not sure, if you don't know what backline is, that is, I'll use a concert, for example. We're flying in a concert, and the guys are coming right off the plane. And they may have their guitars, but of course the drummer's not flying with their drum kit, and then they want extra monitors. We don't have that kind of stock at the Art Center, so we use an outside contractor. We bring in the back line and rent the back line, and the contractor also brings one person with the back line to babysit that back line the entire night to make sure that it all works. So those are extra expenses as well. The last expense that we have for presented shows is contracted labor fees. So that is, I will use Buddy Holly as an example. That show needed 13 hands. And what hands means is loaders to unload the trucks that arrive on the day of load-in. They have to be there on site to help construct the set. And then we have stage hands. So that would be the running show of the crew. So let's say Buddy Holly came with 5 people on the tour. They also needed us to supply 6 more people to run that show. They didn't come with follow spot operators, they didn't come with an extra deckhand, and they didn't come with an extra fly rail operator. We don't have that kind of staff, so we have to contract that labor out. Those are all the contracted fees that are negotiated at the time we create an offer to present for these shows. The next set of expenses we have is our operational day expenses. So all of those fees I just talked about are baked into the day of, but the additional fees that are baked into the day of that when contracting a show with a booking agent will not factor in are obviously the staff salaries for the day of. And a presented show, an average day can be from 8 hours to 16 hours. So that will depend if it's what in the business they call one and done, meaning they're coming in at 8 a.m. with their truck to unload, they're doing their sound check, their rehearsal, they're doing a 2 o'clock show, they break for dinner, they then do an 8 o'clock show, and then they load out in the truck and they're usually gone by 1 a.m. That's obviously a 16-hour day for us. I'll use Rob Lake this past weekend. He loaded in on Saturday, but we still ended up with a 16-hour day on Sunday because they did not finish the load-in by 11 o'clock on Saturday night. So we had to come in early on Sunday and then stay all the way through the end. So that's how you get those extended days for our weekends. Other operational day expenses is we have to have security on site. So we have a contract security labor, and we have them on site in back of house and in front of house. Also because Macklin's brings alcohol, so we definitely have to have them for all of our presented events. Our custodial labor, obviously to keep the building clean and shiny, and then concession operating fees. Majority of the time for the presented shows we did this past season, we covered all of the concession operated fees except for 2 shows. So that was a bonus. We didn't take in any costs there. So that's kind of the recap of how a presented season works at the center. So if you see at the bottom, this is through the end of July, we've taken in about $310,000. The expenses to put on these shows cost about $300,000. So we have a difference of a plus $10,000. The goal with a performing arts center is to be at 70% cost recovery. The goal that I am trying to achieve with the Art Center is that the presented shows are at balance neutral. What we have to spend is what we bring in, so that way we can show these shows to the community and we're not putting a humongous dent into the budget. The second tier that we have at the Art Center are our resident companies. So as a reminder, that is the Community Chorale, the Community Orchestra, Theater Coppell, the Ballet Ensemble of Texas, and the Arts Council. These groups this past season put on 84 individual events. Theater Coppell had a 5-show season, which consisted of 45 shows. They did have 1 show canceled due to COVID. The ballet did 5 individual performances. The chorale did 10 shows and 4 master classes. And the Coppell Creatives put on 13 different art gallery exhibitions in our lobby with 2 workshops. And we had 5 community orchestra shows. So in total, they had 7,578 tickets. 5,134 of those tickets were paid tickets. There are many shows offered for free from the resident art groups. The orchestra and the chorale do free shows, and there is no admission price to come in and view the art at the center. One of the art workshops was a paid ticket. So that's the difference with what we've got with presented shows versus resident company shows and how they offer their services and their art to the community. So let me show you how that breaks down at the Art Center. The resident arts groups, they receive the face value of their tickets back to them. So if you've got a $20 ticket and you say, I'm gonna buy a ticket for $20, and then when you check out, you pay the 3 extra fees, so it's a little bit more than $20, the $20 goes to the resident art group. The only thing the Art Center receives is that facility fee. The other fee, which is the credit card fee and the ticket processing fee, the credit card fee is to process the credit card charges, and the ticket processing fee is to run our ticketing services. So we don't receive any revenue from those 2 fees. The facility fee is the only one we do. So the Art Center's revenue is rather low when it comes to being a vessel for the resident art groups. Like I said, we receive just the facility fee back to us, and if there are concessions, profits from the resident art groups. But our operational day expenses are actually a little higher for the resident companies because they have more performances and more rehearsals in the building. So for a show day, their days will consist of 6 to 10 hours for our staff. We do budget a certain amount of money. This past season, it was $15,000 to do paid marketing for the resident companies. It is not our sole responsibility to market for them. However, we do help boost them. A lot of the marketing we do for them includes their shows with some of our other presented shows to bring awareness to the resident companies, but we did do a citywide flyer this year for them, and we did do some singular Gazette paid ads just for their shows. Again, sometimes, depending on how events stack out during the day, we may have a resident company show in the Wilson Theater, and we may have another resident company show in the main hall, or a presented show in the main hall. We don't have enough staff on site sometimes to cover just being the point person in charge of their events. So sometimes we have had to hire stagehand labor to run the boards for their shows if they did not have volunteers to do so. We also then have to have custodial labor, and then there's the concession operating fees. The resident companies' concessions numbers were lower than the presented shows, but it's also because their audience base is lower of showing up. So of course, that's not gonna cover all the operating fees. We do staff with Macklin's according to numbers, so we don't just bring and set up all 3 bars for every show. We organize that by how many people we expect to be in attendance to try to keep operating costs low. So if you see at the bottom, $83,000 was paid back to these resident companies. Majority of that money went to Theater Coppell and the ballet because they had the most paid ticketed shows, and then a fraction went to the chorale and the orchestra. We only received $5,400. That's the estimate from concessions and from the facility fee. And then it costs us about $140,000 to operate their shows and their services in the building. So that's the second tier of the Art Center. The final tier of the Art Center, which is the most profitable tier, is the private rentals. So the last time I saw all of you was in December when I asked if I could have the event supervisor position reinstated. We have hired an event supervisor. Her name is Anna. We have executed at the end of September 51 private rentals in the building this year. 21 of them have been in the main hall, 24 of them have been split between the reception hall and the lobby, and then 6 have been in various other rooms in the center. The breakdown of private rentals is positive for us. Rental revenue, the space fees come right back to us. Then there are technical package fees that get charged on top of the space fees because there's equipment that is not included in the rental space that private rentals will pay for. Example, if someone's going to come in and they want a live band mix, we're going to need more microphones and monitors and DI boxes. That's not basic and standard, so it's more labor for us to set up and use of our equipment, so there's extra charges on top of the space fees for that. Direct costs of private rentals that just go directly to the client are if we have to contract labor because it exceeds our staff to run the event, the client directly pays those labor costs. And we currently work with a stagehand contracted labor that's in this area, DFW, called Stage Corps, and they charge $45 to $50 an hour per technician, dependent upon what their position is. If they're a soundboard operator, a follow spot operator, a deckhand, a fly rail. Those costs go directly to the client and they pay them. Furniture rentals, if we have a party and they're using the reception hall and the lobby and they have 300 people coming, we have a stock to seat probably about 100 people with tables and chairs. So when we need to rent furniture beyond our stock, the clients pay for that directly. We work with a company and then we just invoice the client so that it's all set up and dropped off and we organize all that so the client does not have to do that. And the last thing that we also do the pass-through for are table linens, so that we make sure they're pressed, they're clean, they're showed up, and then the client pays for those costs. So that's nice for us because it's not expenses that we incur. The only expenses that we incur are operational costs of the day of the event, which again, that can be anywhere from an 8 to a 14-hour day event. We rent out the space at increments of 8 hours, and certain events in the main hall will be 12 hours, so obviously we'll have to stagger staff to come in early, to stay a little bit past. And then we need security on site and custodial labor. You might wonder, do we charge for that? Security and custodial labor is baked into the space rental price at the time. So when you rent the space rental of the Art Center, what comes with that rate of the room also includes an event manager for the day, a production coordinator for the day, and security and custodial, because we have multi-events going on at the same time. So trying to navigate, well, you had a security guard for 2 hours and you had one for 4 hours, it's easier to just bake it into the rental price. So those 51 rentals this past year have brought us in an estimated $191,000, which is above the estimated budget that we put in for 145. So I think that's been good. Our expenses have been about $60,000 with all of the staff and security for that. So we have about a 70% return of our revenue on our rentals. So this is where we can make more revenue at the Art Center, is through these rentals. So as an overview, these are our 3 tiers that we have at the Art Center, and how we produce events and how we spend our money and how we make our money. We had the 31 presented events, 84 resident group events, 51 private rentals, which is in total of 166 events on the calendar this past year. So if you're wondering how 161 events pairs out for building usage, with all of those events, plus add in rehearsals, add in open gallery hours and open building hours, the building was activated 346 days out of this year. 137 of them were activated for presented events and private rentals, which if you see, that's less than 166. So you'll see that we stack the building, that there will be multiple events in multiple spaces at the same time in order to do that. Out of all of those 346 days, the resident company usage, the Wilson Theater was utilized 90% by Theater Coppell. We have done nothing in the Wilson Theater in this season. However, we are looking at ways to activate it for next season. We're going to work with the library for a co-pro to bring in some authors that Coppell residents from books that they like. And we're going to try to do those on off days where Theater Coppell is not rehearsing in the space, which is usually Wednesday nights and Saturday nights. And we'll build out that experience on whatever stage is in the current construction for the Wilson Theater. So that will be our first activation beyond resident company use in the Wilson Theater this year. And the main hall had 51% usage combined by the community chorale, the orchestra, and the ballet between their actual events/concerts and all of their rehearsal time, because they all rehearse in there once a week. That's the building usage for this past year, and how that usage plays out with our staff goes down like this. I talked about how long of a day is for certain events. So here you see the breakdown for a ticketed event, which is 6 to 16-hour day. We have to have the following on site for them: one house manager with then our volunteers, one box office representative, a production manager, and usually 2 event technicians, security guards, bartenders, and custodial porters. Also, once we hit more of a target audience and we've sold more than 200 to 250 tickets, we need to up those staff numbers so that we can have the quality and level of service for everyone that enters the building. A private rental is a little less staff, and mainly because since the client pays for contracted labor, we will contract labor out to give our staff a little bit of a break. So for those, we need one event manager, one production manager, someone sitting at the front desk to greet people, again, security and custodial. The last section for us is open building hours and rehearsals. There at minimum needs to be a front desk attendant, and at night we have to minimally have either one staffer or one security guard in the building. Rehearsals are usually a 6-hour shift, and that's usually an 8-hour day for one of our staffers if they're covering an evening rehearsal. As a reminder, this is our organization chart at the Arts Center. You've got me. We do currently have one intern. She's kind of coming in about 4 to 6 hours a month right now. She just moved in at SMU. We've got marketing and ticketing that has a ticketing specialist and one coordinator. We've got a patron services supervisor that covers all of our volunteers, schedules all of our security and all of our custodial with one coordinator. We have our event service supervisor that you guys added in December. Her coordinator position is currently vacant. However, hopefully September 6th will be her first day, so we're excited. And then our production department, who they execute, plan, and advance every single presented event, private rental event, and resident company event, consists of 2 supervisors and 2 coordinators. So again, just on top of regular staffing for this, we also take part in city training and leadership and book studies, and then we also do trainings and certifications at the theater as well to make sure that we are certified in our rigging and we're up to date with venue management and with volunteer training and things like that. That, in a nutshell, is what we do and how we did it this first season. We are still in our learning phase. We started and it was still kind of COVID high. We did have 3 shows that canceled on us this past year. So we're going into this next season hoping nothing cancels and hoping that all the efforts that we've done in this season and what we've learned from it will benefit so that this second season will be even more successful and then we can grow to the next season. Does anybody have questions for me?
Kevin?
Thank you so much for the presentation. It's fantastic. Just on a personal level, my family and I, we've enjoyed many shows at the Arts Center, and I think you guys are doing a great job. In this first season, are you guys starting to get a kind of a feel and a flavor for what, like the appetite of shows that the community is consuming, and what does that look like? Maybe how is that tailored? Maybe season 2 and beyond.
Sure. So the one thing we've found that the community has an appetite for a show that young and old can come to the show and enjoy at the same time. And we learned quickly, I'll use Schoolhouse Rock as an example, that was geared to a very young crowd. It did not do well. So we've learned that if we have to find that correct balance, so that when in programming and planning, I try to look for shows that have that balance, that can target almost any age bracket. And then I start with, okay, is the show available? And then the next thing I start with is, what are the artist fees and the expenses? Because since we have a small house, meaning how many seats we have to sell, we have to be very careful in how much we're willing to spend on how much we can return. Because we don't want to buy too many shows that we know we cannot make our nut back on.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Rihanna?
Yeah, first of all, great presentation, and thank you for the overview, and appreciate the, like, identifying, like, the successes, the areas of learnings, and where we can go from there. Quick question too is, I know we offer discounts to residents. What other groups do we offer discounts to? I thought CISD was one of them as well, and I was curious if there were any others, and then was curious also, like, how much usage we're getting from, like, how much are we pulling in from those different groups that have discounts?
Sure thing. So discounts we have is we have one discount. It's 15%, and it is offered to a resident in Coppell. That it's their event, not a friend's event. And then it's also offered to someone who is a nonprofit. You cannot stack the discounts if you're a Coppell resident and also a nonprofit. It is a 15% discount. It is only offered on the space rental. It does not offer on labor. It is not offered on technical packages because those prices are set on obviously labor fees, but technical packages on wear and tear and use of the equipment for that when we have to have replacement plans for. So there are a lot of those rentals. I would have to say at least half of those rentals had that discount applied to it, which we're more than welcome to do for them. And that discount is continuing through the next season.
And then I had another question. I know that we have J. Macklin's as an exclusive caterer. How is that working out? Have they been able to keep up with the demand?
So J. Macklin's is our exclusive caterer. They have been able to keep up with the demand. There is a buyout option for any rental client that if they do not want to use J. Macklin's, they can pay a $6 per head fee to use a different caterer. If they do use a different caterer, that caterer has to be licensed, has to have insurance, and has to carry the liquor license if they have liquor at their event. The reason why the center does have an exclusive agreement with Macklin's is because Macklin's also provides all of our concessions. And we do a lot of events where we have concessions. And for Macklin's, that is not profitable for them. They're basically making what they make, what they take in is what they make. So the exclusive caterer clause helps them because that's the first arm for every rental. Oh, use Macklin's, use Macklin's. So that's why that agreement was written that way. It helps keep them wanting to continue business with us and continue our concessions because they hold the liquor license for the center. The city does not.
Thank you.
Kevin?
One more question. So the private rental, you said, so that's like our, obviously the highest profitability. Best estimation, I mean, what do you think that the potential to scale that to might look like? And I know that's kind of a broad question. I'm trying to figure out a way to kind of nail that, kind of narrow that down a little bit more. But what do you think the growth opportunity is for that section of the revenue of the center?
I've thought about that a lot. The answer is a little complicated. Right now, our staff is at capacity.
Okay.
So we're at the point where we've had to turn events and rentals away because we don't have the bandwidth to fill it out within the hours. So if we had more staff or there was a shift in how many events we did, presented, and resident company, and we allotted more time to the rentals, we could grow that. We have made efforts where our production staff has set up our reception hall and our lobby to basically be turnkey so that if we have parties in our lobby, in our reception hall, we might not need to have that production coordinator on site, an event manager, and then some other staffer in the building would come in and assist that event so that we can utilize more parties like that because anyone's able to run the technical equipment for that now, and we worked really hard to get to that point so we could achieve that. We could have a show in the main hall and a party in the reception hall. So we've moved in that effort to grow, but to grow beyond that, we need staff because we already hire some contract labor to help us flip, we call turn and burn the rooms. For an example, 2 weekends ago, we had a Friday night party that went to midnight. We had a resident company event on Saturday morning. We had a birthday party that went to 1 o'clock in the morning on Saturday night. And then on Sunday, we had another air engagement that went 12 hours, and they all had at least 300 people attend. And we had to change the layout of those rooms for every single event. We had to take it, and we had rented tables and chairs, and everything came in. And I think our staff, almost everyone worked only Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and all the full-timers worked at least 57 hours that week in order to make that weekend happen. So that's my complicated answer.
Number one, wow. Number two, I would love to see, and I don't know, but basically like, maybe kind of like your, expanding that, what kind of resources would that take? So like adding one staffer, we could get to this capacity, adding 2 staffers, we could get to this capacity. Is that something that you could make available to council if you have that, if not?
In a perfect world, I've thought about the ideal structure of the Art Center.
Mm-hmm.
In comparison, looking at how we structure our facility and how other facilities structure themselves in this area. So just a little bit of backstory. We purchase the same shows from the same pool of talent that the Eisman Center and the Majestic search from. Both of those theaters have many more seats, but it's the same quality and caliber of art that we book in. As an example, the Eisman Center has over 29 employees. They have 25, I think, full-time and 6 part-time, and then they have another whole chunk of part-time at will. Irving Arts Center, they operate a little bit different, but they have over 42 employees. So I'm not saying we need to grow to that expansion, but I do believe if we are going to successfully move forward, we need to shift this organizational chart around a little bit, and some of the ways would be we need to add development into what we do so that we can try to attract more revenue for our presented shows by possibly having a development area within the marketing area, search out season sponsorships, because then that can offset artist costs. And then if we had extra part-time event services coordinators, we can have more private rental events. And if we had some extra production coordinators in the production department, we then can cut down on contracted labor fees for resident companies and for private rentals. Sometimes with presented shows, like I said, you get a rider that says you need 12 hands. I don't need to have 12 employees on site all the time. That's where you use that contracted labor. So beefing up our part-time staff, I think would really help the Arts Center move forward in generating more revenue and being able to shift things around to be in a more positive direction.
I know I hit you with a lot of what-if scenarios, so I appreciate, honestly, I appreciate your candid answers, because it helped. We don't run art centers, so we don't know that, so I really appreciate your insight on that. And I just want to say I thought first season was wildly successful, so I am looking forward to seeing what you guys can do with second season and beyond. So thank you for all of your efforts.
Thanks.
Don, then Mark.
So sort of talking about what you were just talking about capacity, especially on the presented shows and everything. So what do we target for? How many seats would you like to sell at a minimum for each show? Is there a target that you try to get to 70% of the house?
Correct.
Or is that what it is?
Yeah, with the target goal is 70% of the house. So when you make an artist offer, you add in the artist offer, all those expenses, and then you come up with a ticket price to offer to the agent. And my goal is at 70% or 300 tickets, can I break even?
So how do we do, and I know the shows are probably all over the map, depending on what show it was, right? But
that is true.
In general, sort of on average, or I don't know how you break it down.
So I can break it down to this. Through July, out of those 8,500 tickets that we sold, there was actually 11,500 tickets available. So that's out of those 27 shows. Now, just so you know, you'll hear us say we have 442 seats. However, we actually only sell 426 seats.
Okay.
We've got 4 seats killed for a front of house mix. You have to have 4 house seats, which are available for if somebody, I'll use an example. We had a couple come from Sherman, Oklahoma in July with tickets to a show in July of 23. Well, guess what? We had a show that night, so we sat them in our house seats. So you always have those 4 seats available. Plus, then you've got artist comps that are contracted. We only allow 4. Majority of our artists ask for 10, and I say my house was too small, I can't do it. And then we keep 4 on reserve for us in case something happens. Day of, once we receive the comp list from the artist, we will release those for sale, but sometimes those last 8 seats don't sell. So that's why we actually can only sell 426 seats.
So the numbers you threw out there a while ago, so that sounds like I'm doing math in my head real quick, but that sounds like we're close to 7.
Correct.
You're approaching 70.
We're approaching 70, and like I said, this season, like Schoolhouse Rock, sold terribly.
Right.
Aditya Parikesh, wonderful show. He was brought in more to try to show some diversity in what we could offer. We did not sell it very well.
Yeah.
And there's going to be shows that happen like that. Our speaker series didn't sell that great, so that's what brings those numbers down. What I will say is out of the tickets that we sold, we have a 90% redemption rate of the people actually show up, which is actually very good because usually you're at anywhere from 15 to 20% of your bought tickets don't even show up for the performance.
So we have some capacity to grow in general. The whole season of shows, there is still some capacity.
Yes.
What are you seeing from I don't know how much you track this or how well you do this, but I'm assuming, certainly you get a lot of Coppell residents or Louisville, Irving, sort of in the general area. But I know at Cafe's concert, I know there were people that were outside of the Metroplex that came into his concert. Do you have a beat on how far we're reaching, or is that expanding?
So I do. Excuse me.
Sure.
Our target marketing is Coppell 10-mile radius, and then we expand to 25-mile radius. However, I do have 10 top zip codes that we've sold 100 tickets or more for this past season. Obviously, Coppell sits at the top, and we're almost about 80% of all tickets that have zip code data went to Coppell. But we also, the next 9 down is Flower Mound, Louisville, Irving, Carrollton, Dallas, Grapevine, oddly enough, Sherman. Somebody must know somebody in Sherman because we sold over 100 tickets. The Colony and Colleyville, I never pronounced that correctly. Those are our top 10 that went over 100.
Okay.
But we do have a reach of sporadic tickets. Frisco, Fort Worth, Garland, they're out there. And I will say when the Dallas Morning News lowered their rates so that we could get web-based advertising with them, it did help improve our stretch. So we have been spending extra dollars in order to grab that advertising.
Can you tell yet, over time, is that reach expanding, or is it too early to tell?
It's a little too early to tell because if you go back and look at some of the very first early shows, they're almost 90% Coppell residents. But if you start to look towards the end of the season, that's where we started to get more ticket buyers outside of Coppell. And that is when we started having more ads through the Dallas Morning News. Our target marketing campaign, we've done tests. We've tried billboards. We've tried connected TV, which is ads during streaming. We've done factory cafeteria TVs. We've done standard print in local newspapers. We've done digital ads. And then we have the Dallas Morning News, along with calendar listings and some other magazines in the area. Our top hits have been digital Facebook, digital Google ads. The Dallas Morning News has been doing well, and KERA, and getting on those calendar listing websites. We continue the monthly ad in the Gazette, and that's mainly because we do have an audience base that appreciates that, but we've cut back on the rest of the print. We basically do a couple print ads a couple times a year in other outside entities just as a season announcement, and then we do one season flyer to every resident in the city.
Yeah, well, thank you for your diligence, especially with the data mining and sort of, I know this has to evolve over time, and you figure out what works, what doesn't work, what the community wants. So I just appreciate your diligence and all of staff on trying to get a handle on all that and make the second and third and fourth season even better. So we really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Mark?
Thank you. I really appreciate your in-depth knowledge of the way this runs. I mean, the way you can rattle off facts and figures, and
Yeah.
I mean, it's clear that you're looking at this 10 ways to Sunday. So I have a question. Is this paid out of these staffers right here? Are those is that out of
CRDC.
It's not paid out of the hot tax at all?
No, we haven't tapped hot tax for our.
But we can.
Eventually.
Eventually, okay. I'm just thinking about that. So, do we have a figure for the cost of all these people plus their burden rate and come up with a number we know that we're having to pay the employees?
When we, yes.
Okay, that's all I need.
Okay. Yes.
So, we could extrapolate a number to get to the level you want to be at and know what that set number is going to be, and then see what money we could potentially generate with that those extended offerings. I'd really be interested in seeing that, if we could pull that together. I mean, obviously, we're not going to 42.
No, we're not.
No, we're not.
Bijou?
Janine, good presentation. Thank you for the overview. Greatly done. But I have a question for Mike, not for you. Mike, I'm looking at the numbers. So 1.09 million for the bonds, expense-wise for the art center, 889,000 for the staff, and the 12K for the storage. What about the air condition and heating costs for? Do you have any?
I mean, Jeanine, there's a total operation and maintenance budget you didn't ask for, but I think you have that.
I do have that. So the numbers you just quoted are for the proposed 23 budget. The numbers I have are off of 22. We had $117,000 in utility charges, and that's electric, gas, water, telephone, and general insurance for the center. This year, we did have $115,000 in one-time buys to complete the construction of the building. We needed to buy ClearComm, which is wireless communication systems that every venue has. We needed ADA doors and electronic locks put on. Some of that money was also those billboard tests. We had some extra marketing money to see if it worked. It was really not successful, but it was $32,000, so we know not to try that again. So those are our one-time buys that will not be in the budget next year because we have taken care of that. But the utilities will probably be around the same because we're activated about the same for next year planned right now. Are there any other questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was waiting. We got we got Cliff first. Actually, I've been waiting for a while, so I'm gonna interject mine. So one of the shows that I went to, you already mentioned, was Carly Hall, and it was Kevin was there, and it was lightly attended.
Yes.
But I found it was very enjoyable. Was that because of? I think Kevin and I are far enough apart in age. It's probably not an age-related. You know, do you guys take a look at after the fact about why certain shows don't do well?
We do. And we send those. I don't know if you've ever seen them. You get the surveys that come out. Unless you clicked opt out, then you won't get a survey. I'll use Carl Hall as an example. Speaker series are hard to sell because sometimes people are like, oh, I'm going to spend $39 to listen to somebody talk. I don't know if I'm interested in that. But if you hit the right target demographics, you'll get that. Now, the thing with Carl Hall is she got bumped because she got COVID and we had to move it. So there were people who had tickets that then couldn't come. We spent an abundance of money on marketing. A lot of the foundation grant money went towards that, and we did targeted what they call geo campaigns and interest campaigns that spread 40 miles beyond Coppell. So what we found is when you activate a speaker series, it takes a few seasons for that speaker series to catch on for people to come. And that's why I'm trying this next year, I want to start smaller. so that I can get the interest of the people of, oh, we have this author coming and it's a very inexpensive ticket, which means there's less stake in if something happens that night, I'm not wasting my money. And then when you get that audience base to catch on, that's when you can start bringing in a couple heavy hitters here and there where artist fees are, $30,000 plus all travel expenses. So that's kind of my feeling on the whole speaker series. It's tough to do. It was tough to do during COVID, and it was tough to do in our first season. I believe that we can successfully get there, but it will take a few seasons.
I appreciate your insight. Like Mark said, listening to you explain this at a different level has been very enlightening, so thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We have Cliff and then John. Cliff?
Jeanine, I also think that you did an excellent job on the presentation. And the depth is absolutely great. I appreciate you doing that. Plus, I appreciate you working with some of the more calcitrant patrons that show up on a regular basis. And so I appreciate that as well. It was very rewarding, I guess, to sit here and watch you talk about the meeting room and the meetings that you're doing there. Because when you were still in New York, we got a lot of flack on adding a room to the art center. They said it's not necessary. I mean, this is an art center. It's not a place to meet and mingle. And so it's great to see the numbers that we weren't just smoking weed. We actually kind of studied what we were talking about, and so that's great. So we appreciate what you've been able to do with it, and the fact that you obviously there's more money there. I mean, there's more ways to subsidize the art performances. So keep going.
Thank you, Councilmember Long, for most of that. For most of that. John?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I got a question on most of the events that's been put on, whether it be the rental or also the events, they're mostly taking place on the weekends. Is that correct?
That is correct. Almost all of our presented events are on weekends. All of our resident company shows are on weekends. And then majority of rentals are on weekends. We probably had 20% of our rentals that may have happened during the week, and a lot of that is because rentals sometimes are multi-day events. They'll pay for a rehearsal during the week, and then on Thursday or Friday, and then they'll come in either on Saturday or Sunday to do their show. So with the rentals right now, if we have a rental that does a rehearsal on a Friday and a show on a Sunday, we are not renting out the main hall on Saturday because we don't have the staff capacity to flip the room. So that's one area where if we had the staff capacity, we could spike and flip, because we could have double crews, which means we have more incentive to either bring in a presented show or bring in a resident company. The weekday time is mainly a lot of that's when the supervisors, where we do our advance work and our planning to set up all of these weekend events, and majority of our part-timer hours sit all on the weekend. Where we try to bring in a part-timer here and there is for open building hours if people come in to see the art, so that we have somebody sitting at the front desk, because we do not have a CSA or a theater attendant, what they are called in the performing arts world.
So, of all the rentals and events that went on, that you said, I think you said 51 events and some other rental and things like that, what percentage would you say has actually taken place for the weekends, if you count all the weekends?
So out of 166 events, the actual show, the performance day, I would say 80% of those have all happened on a weekend, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. There just are some of those components of those 166 events that have had a weekday added onto it so that they could have a load-in or a rehearsal.
So, maybe I didn't ask the right way. Of all the weekends that we have that we could rent out, taking into account all the events and also whether it be the performance or the events, what percentage of the weekends have those taken, those events have, occupied available weekends?
Are you asking in total of all events, how many weekends the Art Center was
Yes.
activated? 50.
50%?
This weekend, we do,
No,
this-
50
50 weekends.
50
This
weekends.
weekend, we have nothing at the Art Center, and Christmas weekend, we had nothing at the Art Center. There's some kind of event, at least Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, every other weekend on the books. And we have people calling, we have a list of 20 people right now asking for dates, and we're stacked, some dates are stacked 3 holds deep. So that means we create a proposal, we send the proposal out to the client, and they have X amount of days to accept or decline the proposal. And if they decline, then their date is scratched off, and the proposal goes out to the next person requesting that date. And it's all taken as the order it comes in. As far as how we book at the center, right now, currently with the resident company art facility use agreements, the resident companies get to submit dates for the next season in July. So this July, they submitted their dates for the 23-24 season. Then in August, we have a conflict calendar meeting to go through all those. We lock in their dates. Now that is locked in, now I move into filling the calendar out with presented events, which right now we're factoring 1 presented event per month, except for the month of May, because every resident company has a show every weekend, and I can't fit a presented event in that month. Once I lock in those dates, then the rest of the calendar is opened up for private rentals to be booked. So right now, we're booking through September of 23 for private rentals, and probably by January 1, we will open up rentals for October 1st, 23 through September 24.
October 23 to September 4.
Yeah.
So the resident performers actually get the first choice.
Currently, with their use agreements that were crafted, and their use agreements go through September 30th of 24, they get first dibs on our dates. We are going to work on recrafting. In my opinion, I would like to recraft, and I'm going to have to bring it all to you, recraft those user agreements for 2 reasons. The first reason is it should be reverse. We should be able to dictate what days and what weekends we want blocked off for presented events. And we should also be able to have a resident art facilities agreement that's more in line with what everyone else in the business does. These groups currently pay 0 rent, which is why we have so many operating costs and make nothing from them. Usually a facility use agreement has a charge of 1/10 the market rate for space use. And it also, I'll give you an example. Theater Frisco is a very well-known theater company. They've been around for 30 years. They do their performances at the Frisco Discovery Center. The way that their facility use agreement works is they submit dates for when they want to do their shows. They're allowed to move into the space 2 to 3 weeks before the first performance max. And then they do their performances, and then they have usually 3 days to load out, and then they don't come back until that next period. That company has their own paid space that they pay for, a warehouse, where they house all of their own props, all of their own set pieces, all of their own costume pieces, and they have their own rehearsal space there. So they do majority of their blocking and their directing and their staging and their building there, and they move in to the center right before their tech rehearsals, so that they can kind of get a feel. We load in our set, okay, this is now how the stage works, and they do the performances. That opens up dates on a center's calendar. We don't operate that way currently. We operate with every resident company does every single rehearsal in the space. And then they do their shows. And it also means that for all their nighttime rehearsals, I don't have staff, I don't have production coordinators to be there, so I'm paying a security guard who the rates just went up. The security guards are getting paid more than my production coordinators. So if we're able to retool those facility use agreements for October 1st of 2024, it can be cost effective for us, but still be able to be the vessel for the resident companies to artistically produce the best shows that they can produce.
Well, thank you for that information, because that's where I was kind of leading to, so thank you so much.
Okay, let's make this last question, Don.
I was just gonna say, and I think I saw you there the night of the performance, so I think you already heard it, but I wanted the rest of council to hear this also, but I think it was the 4 C notes the night they performed. So, the performer always makes the statement, oh, Coppell, you're the best crowd ever, blah, 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 they always have to pander to the crowd, right? But he went on to say, I believe it was him that night that went on to say, talked about the backstage and the reception he got from staff, and he said, this has been one of the best experiences we have had. And I thought it was a great testament, because he didn't have to say that. He has to tell the fans they're great, but he doesn't have to tell the backstage staff that they're great. And this is a great experience. And I'm hoping what that does is when other performers who've never heard of the Coppell Art Center starts asking around about this place, that there becomes a reputation of, yes, they really take care of you. Because I'm assuming the opposite also happens. Performing centers where they don't take care of you, that gets around also. So I just I thought it was great that he offered that up just out of the blue. And I hope you all heard that. I hope you heard that night. But I thought that was a great testimony for the first year in appearance.
It is fabulous, and secretly the reason why we're really diligent on doing that is because we are a new, small art center, and I have to attract booking agents to want me to pay my rates that I'm always cut and dry. So if they get that artist feedback, they're more willing to come here before maybe they'll go to the Majestic in Dallas. And I never want to be known as the venue in Huntsville, Alabama, when I played there, and the stage contract labor were people from the jail. So I'm very happy to say that will never be us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for putting the Coppell culture out there.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, and don't forget, we're also very fortunate to be able to attract things like the Dallas Symphony Orchestra that will be here on September the 7th.
Yes, Wednesday night the 7th. We only have 6 tickets left.
Wow, that's awesome.
And they're out.
Wow, they're all leaving.
A little
Always
bit,
working.
They don't
little bit
really
of a
care about
sales.
fire station number 1.
All right, item number C, fire station number 1, relocation discussion. Chief Richardson.
Do we take a quick break or just keep moving?
No, I think we're okay.
Thumbs up for this.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I am walking better. Yesterday I couldn't hardly walk up the stairs. I did a big, I did the triple threat this last weekend, which was torture to my body, so my legs are kind of still sore, but I'm feeling a lot better.
You getting old?
Yes, I am. They were making fun of me. They were making fun of me that my cycling time would have been better, but the mustache was wind drag. So. People, yeah, they always jabbing me. Well, good evening. I'm here tonight. The purpose of this briefing is to provide the council with an update on the fire department's current level of service. And this was based on the current station locations and response times. The fire department has recently worked with an emergency services consulting company to update the information and data from the previous 2017 assessment. And some of you were here back then, but I'm going to spend some time to kind of go over some of that and provide some updated information as well. So in 2017, the city had outgrown the current 3 fire department fire station locations and was no longer meeting the industry or the community standards for emergency response times. Specifically, the fire department was exceeding the standard 4-minute travel time. And this is identified by the National Fire Protection Standard 1710, which is the standard that we go by for emergency response. The standard itself calls for 90 percentile compliance in a performance measure of a 4-minute travel time. So 90% for 4-minute travel. At the time, the 3 fire station deployment model provided a 76th percentile compliance. So in response, the fire department continued to work with this consultant to develop a formal standards of cover. The assessment provided a very detailed analysis and data on our response capabilities and identified future needs. The City Council at the time instructed staff to pursue the option that ensured a level of service where 90% of the city was covered by this 4-minute travel time. To accomplish this, the option that was provided was to add fire station number 4, and then we began some feasibility work on how to and where to relocate fire station number 1. As we all know, fire station 4 opened for service in January of 21. Phase 2 of the plan included a relocation of fire station number 1. That plan had been placed on hold due to uncertainty related to funding issues such as the streamlined sales tax, property tax caps, and the impacts from COVID. So tonight what I'd like to do is provide you some information. At 2017, it's been almost 5 years. I'll provide you some information. We'll go from there. But before we do that, I want to kind of back up a little bit and provide some context on why we're here. Why are we having to add a fire station or move fire stations, and why are we in this position that we're in? So I'll try to give you some background and significance. This is the old firehouse on Coppell Road in Old Town. And in 1958, that's when they started the fire department, the volunteer fire department. And so between then and now, we've evolved from a small town volunteer fire department to probably one of the most recognized fire departments in the state of Texas and some places in the nation. We all are familiar with ISO Class 1, the Insurance Service Office. Today, there's 411 out of 52,000 municipal fire departments that have attained that. In the state of Texas, we've received some accreditation standards, which there's only a handful of departments that were able to attain those as well. On our EMS side, again, the service level has been outstanding. We're not, when it comes to our paramedic, our pre-hospital medicine, we're not aware of another city in the United States that can provide the level of service of having a critical care paramedic assigned to every firehouse. And that's like super paramedic. These are the guys who fly in the helicopter. And so we're very proud of that. So we've evolved over time. But what's happened is our community has come to expect those high levels of service in both emergency and non-emergency. They're going to expect highly trained personnel. They're going to expect, sorry, this is working. This is not the right one. Okay. They are going to expect extremely highly trained personnel who are capable to resolve every single issue. And you'll be surprised at what kind of issues we get called for. But one thing that every single person wants is a fast response. Seconds feel like minutes, and minutes feel like hours. And our industry standards are based on basically two things. One, on the EMS side, in cardiac arrest, after greater than 6 minutes, typically, is when irreversible brain damage will occur. So our goal is to get there before that starts to happen. On the fire side, there's a phenomenon called flashover. This is when the contents of the room reach a combustible temperature, when everything in the room will spontaneously ignite, and anything that's in the room will not survive it. And so our goal is to get there before that happens. So two things. When we embarked on this 2017 Standards of Cover, it was very thorough and detailed. It focused on maintaining our high service levels. We reviewed our response data. We looked at distribution and location of our resources. We wanted to make sure that we were compliant with our industry standards. It made recommendations for how we could improve. At that time, the council direction was to move forward with a option that would create a 90 percentile coverage map, which is the standard, within 4 minutes of travel time. Since then, we have reviewed and updated some of our information and data, and tonight I want to kind of provide that for you to consider. Again, we're not looking for action. Tonight's just an awareness piece. Some more background. So the first firehouse that I showed you in Old Town, located right in this area right here. At the time up until 1998, what determined fire station location was the State of Texas Fire Marshal's office. At the time, the Fire Marshal's office was within the Department of Insurance. And Texas had their own game going. It was called the key rate system. Some of you may have heard of that term before. The rest of the United States had ISO. State had their own system, which was called a key rate system, which covered some stuff on where to locate a firehouse. One of the things that at the time the standard is 1.5 air mile radius from the location. So this is a 1.5 air mile radius of the fire station number 1. Old Town, that's where the city was developing at the time. That's where they built it. From 58 to 86, of course, lots of big growth in the city. We had an increased number of calls for service, and obviously we had increased response times. Some decisions were made before our time, and they built this fire station here at 157 South Moore, was fire station number 2. When I started here in 1992, this is where I was assigned. So from this 1986 model with the 2 fire station location, when you add the standard at the time, which was 1.5 air miles, this is what you get. As the city was developing, they felt like the coverage map was going to be adequate for the city. Well, between 86 and 97, we had super growth, and calls for service continued to increase. Response times were delayed and longer than people were expecting. So some decisions were made to relocate the old fire station number 1 from Old Town down the street to Southwestern Boulevard, where it is now, to relocate the fire station number 2, which was on Moore Road, to the one on MacArthur Boulevard, and they added a 3rd firehouse. And so we actually did that in 3 years. So it was 95, 96, 97, 3 new fire stations. At the time, key rate system says 1.5 air miles. This is your service map coverage. This was the standard at the time. The city at the time felt like this is a level of risk they were okay, and this was the plan. Well, lo and behold, what happens? The key rate system is no more, and the state of Texas adopts the insurance, the ISO. Well, the ISO standard is much more robust, and it's the national standard, and their difference is it's drive time miles, not air miles. Huge difference. If you're in the county, you've got straight roads, you can get there. If you're in urban areas, and the roads are like this, you might not be able to get to where you need to get from air miles, because you're traveling on the road. Huge change in the standard. About the same time, these people, the National Fire Protection Association, the ones who govern the fire departments, ISO is mainly insurance related, they have another robust standard. Their standard says, you know what, we're not too concerned about driving, we're worried about time, because it's 6 minutes is what we're worried about. And so they come up with the standards to say you got 60 seconds to receive the emergency call for service. You got 60 seconds to get out of the station, and you have 4 minutes travel time. That gives you 6 minutes. In Coppell, Texas, we are very fortunate as far as these 2 standards, because this 1.5 drive miles and the 4-minute travel mile are almost identical. They are compatible. In some urban areas, that's not the case, and they have to kind of determine which one of the standards they're going to use. But for us, they're basically the same thing. When you apply that model from the air mile model to the 4-minute response time, travel time, this is the model that we have. This is our coverage map right here. Okay, a little bigger view where you can see it. And since then, the city has continued to develop to we have something pretty much everywhere now. These were the areas that we were having some challenges with. and trying to figure out what we're going to do. So in 2017, our report came out, basically said, yes, we are non-compliant with the standard. With our current 3-station model, with 78% of Coppell was within that 4-minute drive time. The response model did not support current and future growth as the city would continue to expand. And that created prolonged response times for both sides, whether it's the EMS side or the fire side. Created potential for property and contents damage. And we had less people at the time as well. Our ISO report, our last rating before 2017, had a note on there that if there was a possibility that at some point, if our city continued to grow, we would lose points. We would lose points in our scoring that may impact our rating. And then, of course, there's always potential city liability because whenever we have open records requests, which happen all the time, the first thing they want to look at is the response times for litigation purposes. The proposal that we made at the time was to, exactly what was asked for, was to come up with a 90% of Coppell within 44-minute response time, which would put us in compliance with the NFPA standard. The response model would handle future growth and development. That's something that they didn't quite look at before our time. It would enhance our survivability rate because our people would be able to get there quicker. We would be able to protect property. It would preserve our ISO classification and reduce our liability. So these were our areas of concern. These are the coverage maps that we were dealing with, and we're tasked with coming up. The option, we presented several options. The options that we chose to go with was to add fire station number 4 right here and move fire station 1 to this area right here. So move fire station 1 from here, right over here. This in turn would create additional coverage and put us at that 90 percentile coverage rate that we were asking for. Okay, so we would end up with a 90%, right at 90% if we were to do something like this. And that was the level of risk at the time that we were willing to be okay with, which was to make sure that we were compliant with the standard. When the trifecta hit and we kind of put things on hold, we did not move to fire station 1. We added and opened fire station number 4 right here, which was complete in 21. That put us at 86% is where we're at right now. 86% of within that 4-minute travel time. These are our areas of concern. I guess. These are the other 14% of the city that is outside the standard. Phase 2 was to relocate fire station 1, which would put us at 90, which we did not do, and it's currently on hold. While it was on hold, we continued with our feasibility of what it would take to do something in this area. And so we'll talk about that for a little bit. We provided some options in 2017. These are the same 3 options that we kind of provided, but I want to talk about some things that we, in the last 5 years, that have developed. Option 1 was to relocate fire station 1. This would mean the same equipment, apparatus, and people. So there's no increase in staff. You're just moving the facility and constructing it in this area right here. 940 South Beltline Road. It would put us in a 90 percentile of the travel time within 4 minutes. It would be in close proximity to the dart line that's coming right through here. The land purchase, we come to find out that this property right here, these 6 lots are owned by one person. We only need these right here from our feasibility study. They're not interested. They want it's all or none. They want to sell all or none. The DCAD value of that property is approximately $2 million for all 6 lots. To build a firehouse over here would be to duplicate what we have now, which is about a 12,000 square foot facility. The total estimated project would be around that $10 million to move the facility. And that would include all of the breakdown of the total all-in project. I will tell you that yesterday, our prevention division was involved in a planning case review where this property is being considered to be purchased, or there's interest from a private developer to purchase this land. The asking price, our understanding, is almost 3 times that much. So if that's the case, this number will definitely be inflated. The next option was to relocate Fire Station 1 to the corner in this area right over here. So across from here, over in this area. This area over here is just not feasible because the dart's coming through. It's going to come right through. Again, we relocate the existing Fire Station 1 staff and equipment. So again, no people, just make the facility. It will put us basically that same area, 90% travel time. It will be in close proximity to the dart rail. There's also Atmos gas line in here we'll have to deal with. And the different piece of this is that this property is actually city limits of Dallas. It is currently owned by the CISD. We have previously met with the CISD. We have MOUs in place and have pre-negotiated some money. I think it's around a $700,000 mark. That was a couple years ago for this area north of the dart. So the dart will come back here. There's a small area, 2-acre spot right here that we would be interested in potentially building a fire station right here. When the property resides in the city limits, again, there's going to be some challenges there dealing with the main issue with this piece of property are there are no utilities. The water and sewer lines are down here to the south, and it'd be our responsibility to bring them up through Southwest Waters, approximately 3,000 feet of water and sewer, and that's not cheap. The other option would be we could tie into our own water and sewer or underneath Beltline Road. That would require some kind of an MOU from Dallas that would allow us to use our own water, not theirs. But I'm like, we buy your water. Okay. You want an MOU? I won't get you. But either way, this property is, and just, I remember last time there was some concern about just, hey, how can the Coppell Fire Station sit on the city of Dallas property? Although the ramp would probably be facing one way or the other on a Coppell street. But there would be some challenges there. Again, it would be the same size facility. Again, this project is around that $10 million all in, and that's with estimated money on what it would take for the utilities, the water and the sewer lines. And we've got the estimates all over the map on that. It depends on the market. The third option, we didn't really pursue much last time, but I want to kind of talk our way through this. Again, we keep Fire Station number 1 where it's currently located. So keep it right over in this area. But actually add a substation, which would technically be a substation, but it would be Fire Station 5th location. At the current 157 South Moore location, which is the old Fire Station number 2. Which is currently the theaters occupied. Are y'all familiar with that spot? Everybody understand where I'm going? Again, no new staff or equipment. What we would do here is we would relocate the ladder truck from Fire Station 3 right over here, and we would relocate our shift commander who's on shift from Fire Station number 1 as well. A little history on that. When we, in 2005, that was the deciding factor that got us to our ISO Class 1, was hiring the staff and putting that ladder truck in service. We had done everything possible that we could possibly do, but without those points, we just weren't going to get there. When we did it, we hired the people and put the fire truck, but we crammed it in Fire Station number 3 that was designed not for them. It had already had people. We, at the time, they made a decision to do some remodel work to try to get them to fill it, and that's how they've been functioning since then. Same thing over here. This fire station was not built to house the battalion chief in his office and his other quarters, but when they implemented having that battalion chief position in the early 2000s, they did some remodel work and crammed him into the fire station there as well. So we'd relocate him as well. The land is currently owned by the city of Coppell. We're recommending a complete rebuild on the property. If you haven't walked through the facility, it's not salvageable for modern firehouse. I remember working there. We had it was a gang shower. I don't know how to say it. I mean, it was not designed for female firefighters. We didn't have all the standards that we have in place now, none of them meet that. So, and it's in dire conditions. I don't know if you went through that, but it would require a complete remodel. So we'd recommend a complete rebuild. And the substation is actually a little bit smaller because it's not housing, it's not going to be housing an ambulance. Our ambulances are already at 1, 2, and 3s. So the total estimated project is a little bit less than the previous ones. So again, we back up our current status right here. We're at 86%. If we want to get to a 90 plus, which would meet the standard, I also want to take a look at this as well. We've been talking about travel time, but I want to show you heat maps now. This is where the emergency calls are happening. EMS incidents right here. So this is the heat map. These are where we have people, lots of people here. This is all property, lots of people over here. When you start talking about actual fire calls, again, the heat map kind of comes a little bit more west. So these are where our calls are happening. When you take everything into consideration, all calls for service, car crashes, hazardous materials, drownings, everything that's fire and EMS related, this would be our total heat map of where our calls are happening right here. Keep that in mind because our recommendation moving forward is going to be, our recommendation moving forward is going to be with option 3, which is different than it previously was. Because of what we know now about the property issues right over here, the cost that's going to be associated with it. Our recommendation is going to be to utilize, keep Fire Station 1 where it's at, take the staff from here and here that we crammed in there and move them and create a substation of 5. The advantages are we own the property already. There's no price to it. It's located within the city limits of Coppell. We get to work with our own building process. I haven't worked with Dallas, but I wouldn't be real excited about it, but I would do it if I needed to. It actually improves our 4-minute response coverage actually above what we had over here, which was 90. It actually was 91%. Another thing I didn't quite talk about, it's kind of complicated, but it's called an ERF, which stands for Emergency Response Force. So we've been talking about the first unit arrival time. What ERF means is that anybody who's assigned to the call, that number. So when you spread your workforce out, we're not adding people, we're just spreading them out. They can get other places quicker. And so that ERF number goes up, which means that we can assemble the crew of people quicker than in a 4-station location. You heard me mention we're not recommending an ambulance be assigned here. We have ambulances at 1, 2s, and 3s, and in our response district. In Coppell, Texas, everybody is a paramedic, including myself, which means even on that ladder truck, they carry the same advanced life support equipment that the ambulance does. They can do all the fancy paramedic stuff. They just don't transport. So what that means is they'll have a small EMS district right in this area where that ladder truck will be first responder to do all of the EMS calls, where one of the closest ambulances will come for transport. They'll probably be about 1.5 minutes behind. So there will be an improvement in our advanced life support. It also reduces the overcrowding situation I told you about these other fire stations. And it is the lowest cost option. Okay, with that being said, I'll be happy to take any questions on that. Yes, sir.
Kevin.
What's the downside of option 3?
The downside of option 3 is it's a smaller lot. Our architects have done some feasibility stuff. There's some elevation stuff that they can do to position and try to come up with a facility that would. Plus, this is a smaller, it would be 2 apparatus bays. What we had there before was 3 apparatus bays. And so that would be, looking at the project, that would be something. Other than that, based on what we have, not adding people and adding equipment, this is our best option. It puts the ladder truck, and I want to talk tactics and strategy just a little bit because that's my thing. But so what happens is you have a ladder truck here at Fire Station 3. Well, they're pretty close to the industrial district. You want them to be last to the industrial district because you want that aerial apparatus to be positioned properly. So you need people to get there first and go, hey, we need you over on this corner, set up here, do this. If they get there too early, they don't know if they're going to be in the right spot. So if you put them on the other side of town, they'll be late getting to the commercial side, but that will be used properly. The opposite in the residential side, if they're late to the game, you want the aerial truck to have the best seat in the house. And if you're bunched up with other fire trucks and they're in the back of the line, we can't get them up there to do their thing. So you want them to be in the residential area so that they get the first spot in the house. Typically what we're trained to do is our apparatus drivers will pass up the house that needs to be done, and we try to leave enough space for the ladder truck. They'll even wait at the intersection sometimes so that they can come in and get ahead of them to come in. Yeah, so tactically, it makes, not it makes sense tactically to get that ladder truck in the right position. And it puts the battalion chief in the center of the city because he's the on-shift commander, where he can get it instead of just being down on the industrial side or on the south side of town. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Questions? Don?
Option 3 does sound like a good option. It is curious, so it's crammed in there right in front of the school.
Mm-hmm.
Does that create logistical problems certain times of the day, or?
Right.
I mean, because you're going to have 100 cars
Sure.
twice a day
Yeah.
lining up at the
Yeah.
school, and it's just crammed in right there
Yeah.
in front of the school. So is that?
Sure. Perfect question. I was fortunate to work out of that fire station years ago. We had a great relationship with the school district, and so we actually created an additional fire lane zone to where we could, if we had to exit, which we always did, it was protected as well. And so it never was a problem of us getting out. It might have, people who weren't aware, the first couple of weeks of school, we had to post somebody out there, or we'd have to cross and guard our school district or police department that would make sure we worked with the school district on communications that, hey guys, this zone right here is kind of for a reason during these hours. And then after the first, second weeks of school, when everybody figured it out, it wasn't a big deal. It really wasn't.
Yeah. Well, it does sound like option 3
Yeah.
certainly makes more sense. Option 2, I don't like that idea of losing control because of the city of Dallas. You just lose a little bit of more control over
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
You never know what. So, and I know that's not the recommendation, but I don't like that option quite as well, even though it's a decent location. So that's all right.
Mark?
When we were looking at option 2 back in 2017, and then we had subsequent discussion about that property. I'm trying to remember, weren't we talking with the city of Dallas about some issues there, and we were trying to I'm trying to remember what
Yeah.
our
So I think
strategy was.
what at the time the city of Dallas strategy was, hey, look, we need a fire station there. Can we partnership?
Yeah.
And you guys can help run Cypress Waters and Coppell. I wasn't real excited about that. I don't think Coppell citizens were too excited about us having to be out of service if we're running Cypress Waters because that development had the potential to have 10,000 people there. We were going to be extremely busy. Since then, the city of Dallas has built a fire station. They built a brand new firehouse. Mm-hmm. It's not occupied yet. It's fixing to be opened. They built a big fire station there right in the middle of Cypress Waters. I'm sure there have been some more construction delays, but it's really close to being open.
Okay. And then by not relocating one, are we still able to service the most southern part Coppell that we had some concerns about?
Not as much. Again, you're just pushing the envelope, you're pushing that 90% around is what you're doing.
Yeah.
You can see down here, there are some areas. Again, it's a level of risk. It's what level of risk are we willing to accept? And this level of risk right here and right here at this 90 percentile, what that means is that in about, if you're getting here in 4 minutes, in 4 minutes and 15 seconds, 20 seconds, you're going to be right there. So it's a level of risk. That's why the standard is at 90 percentile.
Yeah. I'm thinking, that's where all the hotels are in the south, right?
There are some hotels right in this area, yes, there are some.
Yeah. And then in that upper portion.
What happens is, again, if you end up moving this one over here, in this vicinity, anywhere in this vicinity, you still end up with the donut hole over here.
Yeah.
And the donut hole on our heat map say that's where the calls are happening. And so that's why our recommendation is, if we're going to add something, just drop it right in the middle of our heat maps. That's where what you have down here also are commercial occupancies that have prevention systems. So they
13 is pretty precise.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they have added level of, they have alarm systems, they all have alarm systems, they all have suppression systems, they all have supposed to have functioning sprinkler systems. I mean, whereas most of these residential stuff, they don't have that.
Now, when you drew that heat map, isn't that mostly St. Anne's and the rehab center and the memory care center that are getting those calls, or no?
Yeah, they are a lot of the calls. They are frequent locations. Yes, they are.
And in that type of case, don't most of them require transport because they're in that situation?
Some do. Some do. I'll also.
My mom did.
Yeah, yeah.
3 times.
Yeah, yeah. They do. I would say yes. I mean, they usually don't call us unless they need to have transport.
Yeah.
Now, here's what they do. So if it's a non-emergency transport, they contract with a private ambulance company.
Yeah.
If it's emergency, they call 911 by ordinance. So we only go there for emergency critical calls. What I always tell people is that it's not just EMS, but it's a high hazard area. You have 800 residents living on a multi-story and all need aid getting in or out of somewhere. And you have somebody who burned something in the kitchen. We're trying to evacuate all these people in need. And the sooner we can get there, the better. So it's just not making the ambulance calls. They're just high hazard areas in general.
I'm just wondering if we did that, why we wouldn't house another ambulance there.
Yeah. So again, so the ambulance that makes this, you got this one that makes this area in the heat map. They almost overlap these 2 ambulances that are coming right here. Again, there are times when they're both out, not very often. What we actually do is what we call posting. If both of these ambulances are out, we move these guys to sit here until everybody gets back, then they start moving around.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so we try to make as long as we have people who have the training and the tools, it really doesn't matter what piece of equipment they're on. That transport medic will get there, and a lot of times the treatment's done. They're like, hey, here you go. Float them up and go. Sometimes they don't even get out other than getting it back. So, yeah.
You know, it's interesting. I had one of our clients call me about that piece of property, asking if it was reasonable to be developed. And I told him, well, probably, given the city council and that there's no multifamily, there's probably a slim chance to none. But
just protecting from your firehouse.
Yeah.
Chief, if I remember correctly, pre-COVID 2020, you were making a recommendation to move the fire station 4 to that spot, correct?
No.
I'm sorry.
Fire station.
Is the one to the...
Yeah.
The original, not 4.
Yeah, in 2017, the option that we were recommending was to add firehouse number 4 and to move this to one of those 2 locations.
Was it 17, or I thought we had a number of discussion after in 2000?
Well, there may have been more discussions after phase 1 was done.
Right.
and we were working to move to phase 2, but the recommendation never changed. This is the first time that what happened is when we updated our data with our consultant after 5 years. I didn't feel comfortable coming to you with outdated information. So we reran some numbers. And I was almost surprised. I mean, I knew our call volume had increased. But from 2017 to 2022, in 5 years' time, our call volume has increased 25%. So 5% a year if you break that down. And we haven't grown as a city that much. And so our requests for services are going way up.
So my question was, leading up to this was, the heat map also changed?
The heat map from 17 to 22, it got wider. So the heat map was still the same, kind of much. It just got wider. Because in 17, we still had development stuff that had come in over here, hotels, 4 or 5 hotels, people, call centers. And then we had some more development with the nursing homes and other stuff and added people over here. So the heat map is still always kind of in this general area. It got elongated. It kind of expanded to the city limits more.
Don and then Kevin.
You threw me off, Kevin. So it's great you didn't say new equipment, new personnel was really not in any recommendation. It hasn't been the whole time,
That's
right?
correct.
So,
That's correct.
but is there any reason that new equipment or additional personnel is needed? I mean, are we getting to the point where there's enough calls, or we're just spread out just enough that it makes sense to add another piece of equipment,
Right.
or a couple more people or something? Is that
Sure.
necessary at all?
At this time, I'm not recommending that.
Okay.
As the redevelopment process goes on, this plan, as far as location, 20 years ago when they were building those 2 fire stations, I don't know if they had enough, they weren't thinking far enough ahead. I hope that 20 years from now, people are like, I'm glad these guys at least sat down and tried to think ahead because here's what we got.
Yeah.
Now, there might be a time when they're like, hey, call volume, we might need to put an ambulance over here. We might need to move some people around. But right now, as far as that goes, we have such good aid agreements with our surrounding community that we're just a stroke of a microphone away. What we do is we are relying on our own people through that first alarm, which is 22 people. That's what we staff on duty. So we're going to expect our 22 people to be there. If we go beyond that, that's when our neighbors start coming to help us.
If we did substation 1 or 5 or whatever, whatever we
Sure,
call it, I guess it would be built in a way that it could take more people or an additional piece of equipment or something. Is that, I guess you're saying that would go into the planning?
Yes.
For potentially we need to change
It could.
something into the future?
It could.
Okay.
So I'm gonna jump in real quick. Kevin's next. Well, you've already spoken 2 or 3 times.
Okay, a lot of questions.
But Don, the answer, I was also going to ask,
So-
mention it, the lot size is smaller, so we might be limited. So,
Yeah.
but we'll get to the design phase, we'll definitely take a look.
So the 10,000 square feet or thereabouts that you're proposing for Fire Station 5, is that going to give you any space to expand for those personnel, those unforeseen personnel in the future? Or is it going to be pretty fixed into what you're going to be using immediately?
Yeah. So again, it might be determined by the size of the lot. It is a much smaller lot because it's surrounded by the school. And so when we get to that feasibility portion, there might be some opportunity to look there. But right now, based on what we have surrounding them, I really don't expect a reason for us to house additional apparatus there.
Okay. Kevin?
Again, my question is kind of about future growth as well. So we've got Blackberry Farms that'll be coming online, so that comes over there. With the projection of any future growth, how far out do you think this plan will maintain the 90% coverage? That's kind of where I'm going.
So the standard is travel time. So unless our roads start changing, this is based on all the streets that we have in Coppell, Texas now. I think you said 326 miles of streets. Almost 1,000 different street names. I see street redevelopment, but I don't see a whole lot of new streets. Okay, so the travel time's not going to change much. What may change over time, way down the road, is if redevelopment happens and we start doing Addison. Okay, when you think of Addison, the city of Addison, 2 square miles. That's it. And I got 2.5 fire stations, you know. So, and most of it's an airport. So, but they're high rise. And so if our redevelopment occurs and we start going vertical, then yeah, there's an opportunity. But as far as the location of time of getting there, this should be sufficient for a long time. We may have to do something with the people in there. But for instance, like in New York City, there's fire stations in New York City that have 3 fire trucks in one station, just because of the dense area of downtown. So I'm not saying that's what we're going to get, but I mean we'll have the ability to move people around to the locations. But as far as travel time, yeah, we'll be okay.
Thank you.
John?
Chief, couple questions.
Okay.
Just looking at that map right now.
Sure.
The gray dots are where the incidents happened.
Yes.
The yellow dots are where the response was within 4 minutes travel.
Correct.
How is putting a Station 5 going to change the gray dots?
Sure. Okay. So this is the travel time. So even though this is by time, the actual incident map is basically it's probably equivalent. So you can see what you're going to take this area. That's also where our heat maps are indicated.
But the current map seems like other stations already cover those areas, and yet we were still not able to get to that within 4-minute response time. So if you look at even for example, Station 1, if you go back to the other map, where the gray are on the bottom,
yep.
Station 5 is not going to help with that response time, or even with the.
That's correct.
Even with the above,
yeah.
Where the grays are on top.
So what happens is when you add, when we were adding, you still have, you might come in and cover some of this southern area by moving over here, but then it's an amoeba. You open up other areas that they were able to cover from when they were over here. This area up here, there's not a whole lot that we can really do with that, unless you want to spend a lot of money to relocate something else. But it's an amoeba. You move one, you're poking a balloon.
I'm just trying to understand, because it seems like even if you put number 5, it's just all it does is overlap with what's already being covered.
Kevin, just real quick.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure. The objective is the 90 percentile.
That's correct.
Not 100%.
That's correct.
So
well, the standard is 90%.
Right. So there are going to be areas that will not meet the 4 minutes.
Yep.
If so, to your question, this is picking up the center of town. I'll call it the center of town, right?
Yes.
And then it's also providing what he's describing as the ability to. I'll call it spider web to be able to serve other.
And I want to share. I'll share another situation that I didn't really expand upon, but will have an impact. Okay. When we moved, this station right here was designed for 5 people. We added 4, so there's 9 people in that fire station right here. We crammed them in there. We made rooms. We did some remodel work. If these people are going to stay there, if we don't do something, my next recommendation is going to be that we need to do something at Fire Station 3, which would be to take that whole fire station off and rebuild it to handle the 9 people that would be there. Because what we're doing right now is not sustainable. We've remodeled that facility so much. We've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on air conditioning systems that are still insufficient. We've managed, say hundreds of thousands, we spent a lot of money on remodel work to try to make it work. And we're to the point now where it needs significant attention. And so we'll have to, if we can move them out of there, we can do some much lighter remodel and put it back to where it was originally designed for. Yes.
I think, he just explained to me what I think John's question
So let's
actually
go back to your
was.
question. I think I understand John's question.
Okay.
So go back, so this is the
The
model.
gray dots.
This is showing the
Yeah.
80%, 86% coverage of the 4-minute response time. Go to your map that has the gray dots. I think John's question is, why aren't there gray dots in the center of this map near where proposed Fire Station 5 would be?
No, my point was, with the current fire stations at where it is, right? We cannot get to the gray dots within 4 minutes.
That's right. That's your 9% of the city that is not going to.
So what I'm saying is, even if we put number 5 in the center, where the other two are already being covered within the radius, I guess, with the 4-minute response time, how does that alleviate the gray dots that we weren't able to get to currently?
If I could real fast, John, I think this is, if you remove that green star,
You're
there
gonna
would
have
be
a bunch
gray
of
dots
gray
there.
dots. Yes.
And so to get to that 91, by adding that substation right there, it covers those gray dots that.
That's correct.
If that green dot was out, you would see more gray dots there. Like, Chief, could you go back to the previous slide?
Yeah, if you don't.
So you see that kind of darker area in the middle? So that substation covers that. That's what gets you to the 91. So it won't cover those corners that Chief is talking about, but it covers enough percentage in the middle of the city to get you to that 91%. Is that correct,
That's
Chief?
correct.
Wait. I'm still confused. Go back to the other dot.
That tan represents all those gray dots, right?
No, I understand. But I'm saying this is actually, it shows where we were not able to get to within 4 minutes, correct?
That's correct.
With
Gray dots
with
are-
option 3.
With option 3 or without?
Yes.
That's with option 3.
It's
Yes.
with option
Yes,
3.
Yes, that's what we were, yeah. This is with option 3.
So Chief,
This is your remaining 9% right here.
so if you made this exact slide without that green star, you would see more gray dots
correct.
in the middle.
In the middle.
Yes.
Yes. So by adding the substation, you close off
Yes.
enough
Yeah.
of the dots to get to
So
91.
go back, Chief, it should go back to the previous one. See that
These
brown
would
in
be
the
gray
center?
dots.
Think of those as
Okay.
gray
Gray
dots.
dots right there, yes.
I'm sorry.
I'm in trouble.
I had a different
Forward
slide, but
now.
I put that other slide in there just to show you that we're actually making calls in all those areas, because some people are like, well, why would you need to have coverage if you're not making calls? Well, we're making, and those calls were from the last 3 years, so, but yes, you're correct.
Thank you, sir.
You were next.
That's what I was trying to explain.
Okay. Well, yeah, well,
Because I could feel that, yeah, that wasn't
You
there.
just need to speak up more.
You need to take the mayor to call him.
Bijou?
Yeah. Chief, can you please go back to the previous slides where you have a proposal?
This one?
No, one, 2017 versus now. You had, no, yeah, no.
You mean the one with the gray dots?
No dots. I'm talking about, you have a proposal, 2017 recommendation versus today.
Right, so my recommendation 2017 was actually this model right here, which would be this one. This was the recommendation, because.
There was one side by side.
That was the text.
Yeah, text, yeah,
Oh,
the text.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It says 2017
Right.
proposed. Right.
Okay, yeah. So here's a question for you. Today is 86% today.
Yes.
In 2017, what was it?
78.
78. With this new fire station, it will go up above 90.
91.
Okay.
Station 5. The recommendation, Station 5 puts it 91.
The difference is that we added Station 4, and that got us from the 78 to the 86.
And we are still not in jeopardizing on ISO classing, right?
That's correct. It's protecting our response time credit. That's true.
So
Yes.
what level do you have to go below to lose that classification?
As far as response time?
No, ISO standard.
Yeah. So you have to score below 90 overall. And so it's a whole slew of credits: people, personnel, training, equipment, dispatch centers, water supply, water department. All these things come together. Travel time is an apparatus, aerial apparatus, people were all part of this configuration. So you get certain amount of credits for your, whether or not you meet a percentage of their, and ISO is 1.5 drive miles, which is about the same as 4 minutes. Right.
So with 86% today,
Yes.
we are still in class.
We are still class. We are.
We haven't
When
been,
will-
we haven't been reclassed though.
Yes.
With the new fourth fire station, we haven't, the reclass
Right.
was done prior to the fourth
Yes.
fire station.
Right. But I still believe, as we stand today, we're still okay. Now, as things continue to develop and traffic I mean, there's all these other factors that come into play. If we decide to
What's the other factors?
personnel, if we decide to lay people off, that's a problem. If we decide to not have certain equipment on our apparatus, if we decide not to fund our apparatus program, if we decide to not have credentialed dispatch centers, if we decide that our water system is, our pumping system, I mean, all of these things come into play into the entire ISO accreditation. It's a very detailed analysis, from training to personal protective equipment to how you wash your bunker gear, your physical fitness standards. I mean, all of these things come into a scoring point. But yes. So yes, but as we stand today, we're okay. We're not going to lose something as long as we don't dismantle stuff, or if the city decides to develop, and some of these numbers continue. And the other thing is call volume numbers. So that call volume numbers play a role, and our call volume numbers continue to go up. Yes.
Kevin, then John.
So, question then, so what's the timeline for the next certification? And then how does potentially bringing the station online fit into that timeline?
Sure.
And then I guess a follow-up would be, how do you combat the call volume that you talked about? So I know I just asked 3 questions, and I apologize, so.
Okay, so the first one is, I believe our classification is good for the next 6 years.
Okay, good time.
Yeah. It's a 10-year reclass, mandatory. Some agencies, if they know some of these high development cities, they will request a reclass early because they know that their evolution will outpace their score. So they try to renew their score before that happens. So we're good for 6 years.
So that basically gives them another decade
That's correct.
to plan out how they're going to
stretch.
get back to that.
That's
Got
exactly
it.
right.
Okay.
Next, what was the second one? I'm sorry.
The second, I think you answered the first 2, but
Okay.
then how do you combat the call volume segment of that?
Right. So by adding a firehouse now, we've increased our location. So we went from 4 to 5. So the number of times that they'll be going out, it's spread out. So that would definitely help the call volume piece.
Thank you.
John?
Chief, can you go back to the map that we were looking at?
Which one?
The one with the dots and then one before that.
Sure. The one that has the browns in the middle?
Yeah.
Oh.
So that, I understand the brown spots are where there's a lot of calls.
No.
No?
These are travel time.
This is a travel.
4-minute travels.
Okay, 8-minute travel.
Yes.
The brown is.
The browns are 8-minute travel.
8-minute travel.
Okay, but not that it was heavy on those areas.
So, and I didn't really explain 8-minute travel time a little bit, but let me explain what that means. That means that the standard for everybody else to get there. So, not only do we have to worry about these guys, but we got to worry about everybody else getting to the same location within 8 minutes overall, travel time only. So, I'll kind of share just a couple other things. Before we ask, I know it's a lot of money. But I do want you to know that we've done a lot of things before this. This is like last resort kind of deal. So from the dispatch time, they got 60 seconds to get the call out. There's language barriers. There's people screaming. There's noise in the background. They're trying to get this call information out. And to be honest with you, at first we were kind of struggling. They could not make the standard. They're like, man, we got to get it right because they're making errors. They're dispatching incorrectly. Since then, we've implemented what we call a pre-alert system. As soon as they know it's a medical emergency, the first thing they ask is that address. They get that out. We get a pre-alert. Guys are getting ready, they know the address. Hopefully by the time they're checking her out, they look on the computer, they can see what kind of call it is, they know what they're doing. In the past, they would wait for all the information. So that pre-alert is getting us out the door quicker. The other problem is the reaction time is what we call it. When I was on shift, we would get dressed on the way there. Now, you have to be dressed before you get on the rig and seat belted. So we have to have skills assessments so our people can don their protective clothing properly and get on the rig quick enough to get on. And then we also have required our apparatus operators. We've enhanced our training over the years. You know, you guys drive around Coppell, right? Oak Point, Oak Trail, I mean, all the words sound the same. But we are really sticklers about them knowing where those, not relying on GPS, because GPS has created problems. So we've taken a lot of things into consideration. We actually have what we call Opticom systems. I don't know if you know what Opticom is, but basically what it does, it lets us control the traffic signals. So way ahead of time, that it knows we're trying to clear traffic, so we're coming. We're not asking our people to drive faster, because we technically don't. We have our apparatus operators stop at every stop device. If it's a stop sign or a red light, they're required to stop. And we're not asking them to speed, we're asking them for the right of way, because heavy equipment can't stop very fast. And unfortunately, there's been some bad things in the country where civilians have been injured or worse by emergency responding apparatus. The other thing we have is these Opticoms to help us get there quicker. You know, we work really close. We don't really like speed bumps, but we don't have. I don't know if we have any left in town, but
Yes, we do.
yeah, we do. Very few. I hadn't been on a fire truck, but we don't like them. So the other thing we do is anything that has a gate in Coppell, Texas. When I was on a fire truck, we had a key ring about that big, and I'd be sitting there trying to get the key to open these gates. Now we have access to push of a button. We have a system that'll open any gated community or any gated business. We have a lot of gated businesses in town, so that helps us get there quicker. And then we have gain access to the buildings now through the Knox key system without creating damage. So we've engineered a lot of stuff. We even have what we call a shocked clock in the firehouse. So if you're ever in there and you hear the alarm go off, you'll see it's like a countdown, and it gives them the address and it's blinking. And when it changes color, that's yellow, it gives them 10 seconds, and when it flashes 10, that means they're past their time. And we evaluate those numbers on a monthly basis. So we've done a lot of things up front to try to get that 6.5 minute thing, but we just can't teleport. And so this is the option, is that we just got to put our facilities in a position. The other thing we do, I know sometimes you see our fire trucks all up here for training or whatever. Actually, that's very seldom. What we do now is we split half the city. We have one fire truck and one ambulance come from different locations, so that there's always somebody in the firehouse. And then do another training or in-service, whatever we have to do for the end of the day. So we're really trying to make a lot of effort to keep our people in position, because we know that our fire stations are strategically located to meet these standards as much as we can.
So, I'm disappointed that you can't teleport.
Yeah.
But
I'm
all
learning
the
about
equipment
AR.
getting there, not the actual travel time to getting to that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That ERF is a big number that a lot of people don't pay attention to, but in the fire service, it's called 2 in, 2 out. So technically, a fire truck can get there quickly, but they can't legally go in the house inside of a structure unless a backup crew is there. So the sooner the backup crew can get there, then they can go in. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. That was a good update.
Thanks.
Any other questions, guys?
You sure you can't teleport?
Not yet. I was listening to a podcast talk about AR, so it's getting really close.
I think Don's got one last question.
Well, it's more for, I mean, what's the next step on
Yeah,
this?
next
or
step
what's-
is, yeah. I'm gonna let Mike answer
Yeah,
that one.
we'll be talking about it in January.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's not immediate, it's,
No,
I mean, you heard, he answered the question. You know, what Kevin and I talked, from the time, if you say yes at 90%, and this is the solution, let's say we had that discussion in '23, it wouldn't open till '25. So it's not an immediate, this is why you gotta have the long view.
And, you know, and I think the citizen engagement that we had back when we first went through this back in I think the report was done in 2017, but the study was done before that.
Yeah.
It was pretty clear to me, at least at that point, that our citizen expectation was, you know, to provide the best emergency care that we can.
Yes.
And you know.
It shows up in the citizen survey.
Yes. And I don't know how Councilmember Hill feels about it, but when your mom or your father-in-law is, you know, needing care, it's very important to you. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys for listening. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
We'll keep you in contact and
Oh,
we'll go from there. Thank you.
Last I heard was,
Listening to the department and the rats and the news.
we're still working on it, I got till next Friday.
Yes. Item number 4 is an adjournment. There being no further business before this council, we are adjourned at 8:34.
Thank you.
Boom.